Matthew?
Yeah, I'm just in the bath. Make yourself at home.
Sure. So, I had the weirdest dream last night.
I'm actually a bit busy at the moment.
Should you be playing that in the bath?
Oh, it's fine, yeah, look, I've got it. It's not going to run out of batteries because I've got to let it plug into the mains. So.
Oh, nice.
Are you alright?
Yeah? I feel a bit weird from this Sonic the Hedgehog drink.
Right. Mate, that's bleach.
Why would Sega make bleach? Oh.
Look, I know what will sort you out. A nice round of hot toast. What are you doing?
I'm playing video games. There's nothing else to do.
Right.
Or we could watch video game television.
Sure.
For those of you just joining us, after a week of surveillance, we tracked down these 4 criminals to a bungalow in Slough. We go now live to the scene with our justice correspondent, Stephen McArthurs. Stephen.
Thank you, David. I'm moving into breach. It's time to get these bastards. It's time to ask these bastards.
What else is on
serious questions.
video games television? Let's talk about Passpartout, A Starving Artist, a game where you play a capital A artist, the kind of person whose main expenses are wine and baguettes. That's not a joke. Every 5 minutes, the game literally charges you for wine and baguettes. It's a game where you sell paintings, but you have to paint everything yourself, or as one wag in a Steam review put it, it's Microsoft Paint Story Mode. Now, I love myself a little management game, so I was excited to play Passpartout, but the thing is, there's almost nothing here. It really is as simple as paint something, put it out, paint something else, put that out, say to someone, no, I want more money for that painting, buy a loaf of wine and a bottle of baguettes and do it all again. I found the design kind of thin and repetitive, so I'm not gonna tell you to buy it, but listen. So I was playing this game, right, and I can't draw for toffee, as we say in England. Not even the promise of a toffee can save my paintings from looking like they were drawn by Octodad, but that doesn't matter in Passpartout. I was able to make a living selling my abominations, and then something magical started to happen. So I'd draw this fella walking down the street, and maybe I'd give him a big melon head and then it would sell. So because being creative takes effort, I'd just draw it again. And then that would sell. And then I didn't want to draw my awful man anymore, so I'd draw something abstract and expressionistic, and then that would sit on display forever, with people saying rude things about it as they walk past, not wanting to buy it. So you know what? Fine! I go back to drawing this stupid fella with his stupid walk again, but now I hate my audience, and I hate this fella. What does he have to be so happy about? Where's he going? Why won't he f*** off? So eventually I become so sick of drawing him that I enter a new oeuvre where I draw a rubbish little boat on an ocean, and I don't know how to feel about it, but the people, they love it, and now I respect them even less. This really speaks to me, someone will say, and I'll think that this person must have all the depth of a puddle of spilled wine because it's clearly rubbish. I know that I created it simply because I had to create. It has no soul, it has none of me. But fine, I'll draw boats. I'll draw boats until I'm so sick of boats and suddenly this game became just a little transcendent. Because this is what happens at the intersection of creativity and work. This is what happens when you grow apart from an audience. And I'm still not going to tell you to buy Passpartout, but my goodness, there's something about the game that nails the gawping horror of the blank canvas, the need to create beauty because you've got bills to pay, the misery of doing something you think is great that gets no attention. Anyway, I think that Passpartout has a little magic to it because I think that's going to be most people's experience of it. You buy it because you assume it'll be relaxing and fun to just draw and then put the art out and have little pretend people come and say things about it. But actually, it might just make you a miserable, exhausted artiste. Maybe I was wrong when I said this game didn't have much to it. I mean, it helped me to explore the layers of my own creativity. Just as I was about to put it down, I neared the end of Act 1 and heard a rumor that an art critic was going around, and I panically binned that one painting that was never going to sell that I kept around as an act of aggression against the general public, and I quickly painted that terrible man on the street again because I'd lost faith in what I felt was beautiful and was taking my cues from others. And the critic came along and liked my work, and then you level up and you get a studio and you walk in and there are empty frames and a blank easel waiting for you to fill them with more compromises, and you think, this wasn't worth it.
That game looked good. Do we have that one? Can I play that game?
No.
Oh, personally, no. I think it was wrong that those Pokemon were killed.
Thank you. That was Soft Toy Snorlax on today's hot topic. The extrajudicial killings of the Safari Zone 4, right and good, or wrong and bad. Obviously a complicated, morally grey issue, but oh, now I've just had word that in his earlier years, Snorlax Soft Toy may have been involved in the murder of dogs. Impossible to confirm or deny at this stage.
Oh, I never told you about my dream. So, you were there, but it wasn't, I just knew it wasn't you, okay? And we were running a shop which sold sort of games, but they weren't really games, they were kind of books.
Nobody cares about your dreams. Please don't tell us all about those. Nobody cares about your dreams. 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 I know you can feel emotionally real. Nobody cares about your dreams. Nobody cares about your dreams. But nobody cares about your Nobody cares about your dreams. Nobody cares about your dreams. Nobody cares about your dreams. Please stop telling me about your dreams.
I know you wouldn't do that in real life. Yeah. And I think that means that
Have you played Torment? Did you ever play Torment Tides of Numenera? Because that was a bit like a dream.
People think their dreams are interesting because they experienced them. Without those specific emotional connections, well, it's just nonsense. And this is exactly the same as game designers who come up with reams and reams of backstory for their traditional fantasy video games. It might be interesting to them, I'm sure it is, but 9 times out of 10, it just sounds like this.
O mighty Sunlord of the Netherrealm, the Evershards of Crostini have crossed the sacred barrier, and the Goblin High Seer of Northundel has awoken, as was foretold. So, we must travel across the Hootanan Chasm to summon the might of the Grobkin, as was foretold, obviously. I mean, this is... right?
I cannot think of how many games I've played that have expected me to immediately care about the world and the characters right at the start of the game, and I'm sorry, but no. Get me fully invested though, and then yes, sure. The final hour of the original Mass Effect was the most exciting thing ever, because by the time it rolled around, I officially lived in space. I had graduated from space school. I had a tattoo of the Milky Way on my bum. But, sorry, I'll never forget how the game got me to that point. The game effectively trapped you in a space station plaza until it was absolutely sure that you believed you were in space. It was a fictional digital alien intervention. Crude, but it worked. Well, you know, it worked unless you thought the game was boring and took it back to the shop and traded it in for Valve's Orange Box 10 years ago. My youth is an increasingly distant blur of wasted opportunity. Torment, Tides of Numenera, takes a sneakier approach. It isn't vague and sparse. Gosh, no. I mean, right off the bat, it's a game about reading. The introduction alone is like being baptized by a library. And frankly, because of the tone and quantity of the writing, it needs you to care about it quite quickly to avoid you bouncing off. It's a game that sometimes makes about as much sense as a dream. It's both impossibly grand and unexpectedly strange, but also suspiciously contained and neat. Nothing makes sense, and yeah, actually, everything kind of does. And these infinite worlds of rather tiny, small rooms. Don't look at anything too closely. You wouldn't want to wake up. But it uses one weird old trick, doctors hate it, that within the first hour of the game has you actively caring more than you should. And to be double cheeky, this trick is exactly the same one as it used in the fantastic 1999 classic Planescape Torment. Right from the start of the game, everything is all about you. That's right, you. So Planescape Torment featured a protagonist who couldn't die, and hence had been knocking about for absolutely ages. So when someone tells you about an ancient commander of a giant army, that was probably you. Your character did that. Or when someone tells you about the mysterious anonymous hot dog eating champion who ate the world's biggest sausage and lived to tell the tale. It couldn't be. My God, it was me. Numenera, whilst using a different premise and setup, has exactly the same trick. You are the latest in a string of cast-off shells from a hugely influential, powerful being. And that means that the history of the world, the major players and events and glue that ties everything together, well, at any point there's always a chance that you, historically, might have ended up being right in the middle of it. It's like being a conspiracy theorist, but in a fun, cool way. I mean, obviously, this is a slightly cheeky trick that plays largely into the fact that humans are designed to be quietly naughty little egotists. But, of course, tying everything back to the player too frequently can cause real issues. It can frequently make games in which the world just feels smaller, and sometimes Numenera does stumble into that, but largely, it works, and when it works, it actively turns exposition into an exercise in interactive puzzle solving. Rather than passively plodding through chunks of backstory in the hope that eventually the fleshed out fiction that you've assembled will be pleasing enough to have made the whole process worth it, you examine the world as you pass through it with a very granular eye. Everything you read and hear you approach with the mindset of a detective, hunting for clues in this grand, unified, monogrammed mystery. And of course, by the time you're 2/3 of the way through the game, you realize that half the stuff you've become an expert on isn't actually related to you after all. But at that point, it doesn't matter. You're invested now, aren't you? So yeah, all it has to do is tease you with the idea that maybe everything and anything in this world is about you, and then every time the game throws a new blob of heavy lore directly at your face and teeth, you catch it in your mouth like a big happy dog, because it's more pieces of an interesting puzzle that's almost definitely all about you, because you're a bad, egocentric dog. Bad dog. No more mirror for you today. Bad dog. Anyway, the combat is rubbish, but you can almost always avoid it, even though you're constantly being given things that make combat, but just ignore it. The 3D characters in the game arguably do look like mid-range sex dolls, but it's just a game that's absolutely packed with fun, fascinating ideas. It's like a Tupperware box crammed full of wasps, but in a good way. Anyway, look, I love it, but a second opinion is always useful. So now, let's look at both sides.
Always found it rather frustrating, except for one part, with the cat person.
and he lived in a mushroom, and I was completely nude.
Sorry, what game are you talking about?
The Elder Scrolls 3, Morrowind.
Oh no, this is actually about, Torment Tides of Numenera, 2016.
I've not played that. Of course, I never found an Elder Scroll myself. Rather, I wrote one down on a sheet of lined copybook paper as I played, and it was my Elder Scroll.
Neither good nor bad, but actively somewhere in the middle. Live now on the line to explain this phenomenon, fake detective PCI Express.
Thank you, David. Yes, of course, most people would say that murder is always wrong, both morally and legally, but of course sometimes it is fine, providing the people involved are tangibly unpleasant.
And it has been confirmed, I believe, that these Pokemon were bad people?
David, without a shadow of a doubt, we've got a situation by, if you look at the body camera footage, we can see what appears to be terrorism paraphernalia in the background and documentation here in the forefront, which pertains to, or perhaps literally is, blueprints for a robot of some sort, or perhaps a machine that believes in eugenics.
So this ambivalent, middle-of-the-road sensation is because it was bad Pokemon killed good?
Well, at the end of the day, yes, it is that simple. And I think you have to take into account here the fact that we did see Arthur MacArthur's killing these Pokemon in a fashion which was quite cool, with quite a cool gun. And in the eyes of the law, that does mean something.
Coming up next on the show, we've got a fascinating interview with the manufacturer of the pistol used by our justice correspondent, MacArthur. Now, we've always been very fond of this particular brand of small, punchy pistols.
Alright, let me tell you about how I ended up at the Norwood Suite. A game by developer Cosmo D that costs £7 on Steam. It's about spending a night at the dreamlike Norwood Hotel. Run by a long-vanished musical genius, it's the kind of place where all of the guests are looking for something and magic and music has seeped into the floorboards. It is a game of really playful, considered sound design. You want to play with headphones and you want to spend a lot of time stopping and listening. You could call it a walking simulator, but then I would hate you. Do we call Mass Effect a shooting and boning simulator? No, we call it a role-playing game because that's true to the game's ambition. Let's try something that's actually useful here. Join me in calling the Norwood Suite a place. And it's a really fun place. The Norwood Suite is part of a recent wave of games that revel in the surreal. Games like Jazz Punk, Layers of Fear, or Brendan Chung's Quadrilateral Cowboy. And for me, this genre is the most exciting thing happening in all of video games today. For my entire life, and probably yours too, video games have been part of a dumbfoundingly expensive struggle to replicate the stories seen on TV and film. But we've ended up only halfway there, in a bleak no man's land where video games, for all their cutting-edge motion capture and well-paid writers, still struggle to have a story that makes basic sense, let alone creates sophisticated emotional resonance. Today, the only people who have true respect for video game stories are still simply people who play a ton of video games, and therefore perhaps don't have that many frames of reference. It is way past time to admit that games are bad at replicating the storytelling techniques other media are already using. But that's not a bad thing. It just means we have to find a way to tell stories that embrace the strengths of games. For example, Nintendo have great results embracing the kind of bubbly, squeaky tonality we're familiar with from children's TV. Both video games and children's storytelling are focused on action and movement rather than emotion and dialogue, and both offer abstracted, simplified depictions of the real world. It's a great use of the medium of games. But today, I want to talk about the surreal, and how equally great that can be for games. You see, there's a growing number of video game makers like Cosmo D who are leaning into what video games do naturally, which is being weird. Games are uncanny, unconventional spaces, and the history of games is in part the history of developers working overtime to hide that uncanniness in a quest for more realism, or to attempt to claw at the cultural cachet that TV and movies seem to have. What if we embraced that uncanniness more fully and allowed games to be that much more unique? And by the way, you know who figured this out already? TV! The creators of HBO's fantastic series Westworld openly talk about video games being the inspiration for their profound and unsettling world, where they explore the limitations and sadness and the beauty of simulation. Westworld is about the future of entertainment, even offering a thesis that video game designers might do well to consider. Catering to primal human fantasies is bad, sad, maybe even dangerous. Back to the new genre of surreal video games. Environments that are unfinished have a statuesque beauty to them, as well as a terrible loneliness, a fact put to expert use by Davey Wreden's The Beginner's Guide. Or look at Kitty Horrorshow's work. Simplistic textures force our imagination to try and fill in the gaps, as you can see in games like Anatomy or Haunted Cities. And now we've got the Norwood Suite, which is an exploration of the tone of video games not as the realistic immersive fantasy they wish they were, but of video games as they truly are. Silly, strange, unfinished, and with a beauty that's unique to them. This game is a place where the architecture doesn't look plausible, and by leaning into that, the designer makes it magical. It's a place where the characters emote on such a basic level they recall 1980s animatronics, but this is charming and funny and lends the game an atmosphere all of its own. And you know that funny thing in video games where being able to open all the drawers and cupboards is somehow something we've come to demand, whether it's relevant to the experience or not? In the Norwood Suite, the designer has then gone, okay, well, if players expect to open every drawer, then let's fill them all with nonsense, and it's great. Not only does this kind of decision acknowledge the weirdness of game worlds, it acknowledges that players are even weirder and designs around them. This style of willfully straightforward, almost simplistic development drastically cuts down on the expense and time of making a game, which in turn lets talented creators realize their own personal visions, resulting in games that feel spiritually important. It's no coincidence that lots of the games of the last few years that have felt truly striking, Undertale, The Beginner's Guide, Papers, Please, even Minecraft if we go that far back, were more or less the work of just one person. And on that subject, I should state that the Norwood Suite isn't just willfully wacky. I mean, it is, but also because it's made by one person with one sense of humor and one love of hotels, it has a presence that feels very personal. You see, Cosmo D's previous game, Off Peak, a collaboration with musician Archipelago, was about navigating a strange subway system. And that game is free on Steam, by the way, so download it immediately. And it's no coincidence that he first made a game about being a stranger in a train station, then made a game about being a stranger in a strange hotel. The Norwood Suite, underneath its sticky, surreal wallpapering, is clearly made by a guy who loves making games about being a tourist. Eavesdropping on conversations in near-empty bars, or talking to bored staff who have their own in-jokes, entering hotel rooms that feel like facsimiles of comfortable places where you can't quite put your finger on what's wrong. This game actually strikes a really cool balance of being, at turns, preposterous and familiar, which we also saw in this year's completely excellent What Remains of Edith Finch. Both games exhibit a magical realism where you can explore with the excitement of having no idea what crazy nonsense you'll find around the next corner, while still allowing grounded responses to plausible human characters. Also, oh my stars, it is so much fun playing a game where the sound design can take center stage for once, where music isn't just stuck accompanying the game, but where the game sometimes accompanies the soundtrack. I found myself frozen in doorways in the Norwood Suite because I wasn't willing to leave a room for fear the sound would change. And I really don't want to say anymore. I want you to experience it for yourself. Maybe it's fitting that Cosmo D is making games about train stations and hotels because he and others really are taking games somewhere new, perhaps even to where they belong. And that's all the games. Right. So, do we just... Yeah. Until... Ugh.